So I was driving, this is about the year 2000, I'm driving with my wife and my daughter, and somebody's going to take care of my daughter, and we're driving to Des Moines, Iowa for the World Pork Expo. Don't ask. And we stopped in Amana, Iowa, right off of Highway 80, Interstate 80. And Amana, Iowa is the home of Amana Appliances. It's also the home of a Hutterite colony, and the Hutterites are a lot like the Mennonites and the Amish. And we stop at this little shop they have for wine tasting. One of the Hutterite colonies makes wine, and so we stop there. And as we're leaving, there's this little hotel with a sign out front that says, "Welcome Marble Collectors." I think, we gotta see this. And my wife says, "No, I don't want to see marble collectors." And no, this has got to be fascinating. Whatever it is, it's going to be fascinating. Hopefully it's not the big giant slabs of marbles. And sure enough, it was not. They collected these. Now, if you've ever gone to a conference or a convention, everybody's got tables and booths set up with the things that they're showing and displaying. They didn't have that. Everybody was in their room. They were in their hotel room. And you walked down the hall, and if they had something that they were displaying, the door was open. And you walked in, and they're sitting there watching TV, and when people would come in, they would shut off the TV, and they had their display cases, these big, like 2 foot by 2 foot display cases. They were about this thick, because marbles aren't real big, and they were just filled with foam packaging with marbles all sitting on there. And they would get together once a year, these marble collectors, and they would talk about marbles. And apparently there's enough to talk about that you can meet once a year for a few days to talk about marbles. And that's what they did. And so they're meeting in this little Amana, Iowa, talking about marbles. And I thought that's kind of cool. I'm glad we went. And as we're pulling out and back onto the highway, I said to my wife, how do these people find each other? And what makes them a community? And that's what 12 years earlier, I started thinking about community and how did people find each other. Community really is based on an idea of maybe a cause you support, like Gay Pride Indy, or it's a team that you can get behind, like the Indiana Fever. I'm actually leaving here after this to go watch the season opener of the Indiana Fever WNBA basketball team. Or it's a neighborhood. And this is Irvington, which is a historic neighborhood in Indianapolis, and I was lucky enough to live there for about a year when I first moved there. And they had got these nice old houses that are 100, 120, 140 years old. And one of the things that we saw in the community, and people who live in Irvington really identify with being from Irvington. You ask somebody from Irvington where they live, they say Irvington. Throughout the rest of the city, you ask somebody where they live, they say Indianapolis, north side, west side, south side. You live in Irvington, you're from Irvington. And a lot of the houses had front porches. And this is where community really started. And this is where we got our idea of community. When you went home at night after work, and it was hot inside because we didn't have central air conditioning, you sat out on the front porch. Or you walked around the neighborhood and you talked to people who were sitting on their front porch. And if you were sitting on your porch, you talked to the people who came by. And that's where you got your community. You knew the people who lived in the neighborhood because you saw them on your walks and they saw you on their walks. But we kind of lost that when we stopped building houses with front porches and we started putting air conditioning into our houses. Now, who wants to go outside when you come home and it's 85 degrees outside and it's hot? There's no porch, so you're going to stay inside. So I think that's one of the things where we really lost community. When we first had the telephone, people started saying, oh, that's going to erode community. People aren't going to talk to each other. And then when we got radio, people said, oh, it's going to erode community, and we're not going to talk to each other because we're going to sit and listen to the radio. And then when we got television, they started saying we're going to erode community because people are going to stay inside and watch TV. Well, back when I was a kid, when I was 10 years old in 1977, we didn't have much TV. And I grew up in Muncie. We had 5 stations. We sort of had 5 stations. We had 4.5 stations. We had ABC, CBS, NBC, PBS, and then Channel 4 we could kind of get on a good day. On a clear, sunny day, you could see something. It was through the snow. But if it was raining, forget about it. Anybody remember Channel 4? So a few of you? Sammy Cherry, that's right. So we had these stations, and everybody was talking about television. And so in my community, my 5th grade class community, we had the community of the students, and we were joined geographically because we all lived within a few miles of each other, but that wasn't our community. Our community were the things that we liked and the things we had in common. And so at 10 years old, a lot of us were Reds fans because we're a couple hours from Cincinnati, and since they had won a World Series back in '75 and '76, that's who you saw on TV a lot. And then there were other kids who were Cubs fans, or as we called them, Dirty Rotten Cubs fans, because most of us were Reds fans. And then in the fall, when football season started, because the Steelers had been winning Super Bowls and they were kind of the national feed, a lot of us were Steelers fans. And so we would get together and we would play football, and somebody had to be Terry Bradshaw, and somebody had to be Jack Lambert. You could be Jack Lambert real easily when you were 6 and 7 and you didn't have any front teeth. But when you got older, you had those big, rabbit teeth. It was a little harder. Or when we played baseball, we wanted to be Johnny Bench and Pete Rose and Joe Morgan. I always wanted to be Johnny Bench, my hero. So that community was based on those things that we liked. And of course, we had community around television. And we had the shows that we loved and we always talked about. And of course, if you watch Channel 4, you got Cowboy Bob and Janie and Sammy Terry. So we had a limited sense of community. Everybody's saying, television's going to take away from community, and radio's going to do it, and the phone's going to do it, and it really didn't, because we absorbed those things into our community, and that's what united us, but it was still kind of boring. A bunch of middle-class white kids in Little Muncie, Indiana, they don't do a lot. There's not a lot going on. You don't have a very big bubble in which you can experience life. And so we started getting these things. And these were kind of cool because you could dial up with this thing called a modem. Younger people may not have heard this modem. You could connect with people who also had one of these, and you could talk with them. And so you could build a community online by dialing in to this BBS number. And you could chat with people. And either you met these people in real life, some groups, some computer user groups actually started back in the 80s, because they said, hey, let's meet somewhere and we can see what each other looks like, and other people did not. But you could do this. And of course, it was community-based because it was expensive to dial into these out-of-town BBSs, so most of them were local, and so you really had a lot of them in the big cities. And then our computers started to look like this. And they were faster, and the modems were faster. And then we started getting these in the mail. Anybody remember these? I used to back up my computer system because I'd collect about 10 of these and erase them and back them all up, and I was rather disappointed when they started going to CDs because I couldn't use these. But for $8 a month, I could connect to the world. And I could go online and I could find enough people who liked what I liked that I could participate in whatever they were doing. And so I joined back in 1993. I was member 832,000 something before they ever broke a million. And I got to go explore and see what other people like to do. And so I could click on the clubs and interest button, and I could drill down and I could find a couple of groups of writers who had all congregated. There was my new community. I got to find people who liked to do what I liked doing, because those people I didn't go to high school with those people, and I didn't go to college with those people who liked writing. I found them all on this new internet thing at $8 a month for up to like 60 hours of data. And so that's where I found my community. And then we got this. We started getting Netscape. And then we got the real internet. Anybody remember Netscape Navigator? The real old stuff? Anybody have like Mozilla 1.0 or whatever? Mosaic 1.0, I guess? You could go to web pages and you could go to Yahoo. And this is when Yahoo was kind of cool and it looked ugly, but they were business directories and art directories and all these different sites that Yahoo was pulling together, and you could search for things for people outside the walled garden of AOL. And you could talk to people from literally all around the world. And then you could go to MSN. And they also had a directory that was mostly human-powered, that they were finding sites that looked kind of cool and putting those in there. And then these guys showed up. And they changed everything because they said, we're going to automatically index this stuff. I remember when they started announcing we have indexed 1 billion web pages. And a lot of people these were the ones who were complaining about community earlier, they were going, there's 1 billion web pages? But yeah, there were 1 billion web pages. And so now with Google, I could start looking for marble collectors if I wanted to. So now marble collectors, people who collect these little glass balls, they've got a way to find each other more easily. Instead of hearing about each other through word of mouth, they could go do a search for marble collecting. And then they could get real specific. I want to find other marble collectors. And I can see on here that there's an international association of marble collectors. People all around the world collect these little glass balls. And I could go to their website and I could see that the next conference is in Tukwila, Washington. I mean, it's no Amana, but it's a suburb of Seattle. There's stuff going on there. And they meet and they still gather and meet and get together. And even 12 years after I found them, they're still finding things to talk about marbles. And they've got a Yahoo group. There's 1,000 people. These guys have run this group since 1999, and there's 1,075 people who want to talk about marbles. I wouldn't have guessed there were 1,000 people who collected marbles, but these are the ones who are like active enough they want to find each other and talk about marbles on an ongoing basis. Once a year is not enough. This is a daily and weekly thing for them. What is there to talk? I don't know, but they love each other. But if I don't want to go to Tukwila, Washington, I do a better search and I see that, hey, there's a group of them in Indiana. And they've got a website. And they talk about the joys of marble collecting. Or when I was a kid, I used to collect beer cans. Any beer can collectors? Am I the only two of us? 3 of us? I started collecting beer cans when I was 8 because that's what you want to do is teach kids to collect empty cans of beer. But I remember, my first cans that I got, and I started hearing from a couple of friends that they also collected beer cans, and we were all equally geeky. There were like 4 of us in my 5th grade class, and that was like our little community. And the funny thing was that we only heard about it because we would talk about it to each other, but we didn't know anybody else. And it wasn't, if it hadn't been for my mom working with a guy who was a serious beer can collector. He was in the Beer Can Collectors of America. They had 10,000 some members, and he had joined early enough that he was still a double digit. He was like number 86 or something. And he said, hey, there's this book called Beer Can Collectors of America, or Beer Can Collecting. And I got it, and I found out that there's all kinds of stuff. But I have to think that if I hadn't met Rich, I would not have known about this whole community of people who collected empty cans of beer. But now I can go online, and I can find thousands and thousands of people who collect beer cans. A lot more than marble collectors. There's more of us because, this is cool. The marbles are not. And so now we're using the internet not only to find each other, but even to build communities. Anybody heard of Smaller Indiana? SmallerIndiana.com. If you're not on it, I highly recommend it. This started about 4 years ago. In January 2008, we're up to almost 10,000 members. I was member 36. This is where I got my start in social media, was because of Smaller Indiana. And we got to go to Smaller Indiana and start using it. I called it Facebook for grown-ups, because we got to go have serious discussions about serious things, about the same things we've been talking about here. Smaller Indiana has been talking about throughout the state for 4 years. And so people started finding more interest of things that they wanted to talk about and creating their own groups. I created a writers group on Smaller Indiana and haven't touched it lately in the last couple years. And I went back not too long ago, and I was very pleasantly surprised to see that there are people who have kind of taken this and started running with it themselves. And so we've got a group down in the south side of Indianapolis. They want to start a writers group. We've got a group within Indianapolis who want to start a writers group. My favorite is the woman who's running a self-editing war shop. But there are people who are going out and they're saying, you know what, there's nobody in my community who does what I do, so I'm going to use the one tool that everybody else is using, and I'm going to find them. What's interesting to me is if you look at the number of people who are in this group, out of 10,000 people who have identified themselves as writers, that's about the same number of people that I found on AOL in the writers group back in 1993. With almost 1 million people. So we're able to find each other more easily, and we're more willing to self-identify and collect as a community. The other cool thing that started happening about smaller Indiana, I think we kind of grew the coffee shop business down in Indianapolis because we all started meeting mostly at local coffee shops. And I always tell people, meet at local coffee shops, Craig, because partly because you're helping your community by doing that. Every dollar you spend at a local place, 40 cents stays in your community. You spend it at a large national place, 13 cents stay in your community. If you want to help your local economy, go to local businesses. So I meet people here. Then this is Hubbard and Cravens in Broad Ripple. This is my second office, and I tell people, even new clients, hey, you're going to meet me here. And so we come into Hubbard and Cravens and we meet. And the people from smaller Indiana, we would connect online and say, hey, let's go meet for coffee. And we would show up and meet here for coffee. That's Jason Falls sitting in the front. He and I wrote No Bullshit Social Media together. And we would gather people here once in a while. And Jason would drive up from Louisville and meet with us. And it was just a good time, but it was a great way for us to create our own little community. Now I can't walk into Hubbard and Cravens without seeing 2 or 3 people that I know, because I've brought them in or because I've met people there, and this is a community. Now we're not only being united by geography, but by a common interest of really liking very good coffee, but also a lot of us are small business owners and entrepreneurs, and we want a place to gather. We met and built this thing on the internet, and we started gathering in public and building our new definition of community. A group of us also started gathering in small restaurants. Once a month, we call it the Hole in the Wall Club, and we go to some little restaurant that you wouldn't normally want to go to, and we started gathering there. But again, that grew out of smaller Indiana. So really, community is built on any one thing that you do and any one thing that you like. And unlike what we could do 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, we can find each other. It doesn't matter what kind of weird habit and hobby you've got. If you like collecting marbles, more power to you, because there are groups out there who will help you with this problem. You just have to find them. Go on the internet and find them. There are groups for just about anything you want to do, anything you like. It doesn't matter how weird your thing is. There is somebody who shares what you do, and there are ways that you can find them. All it takes is going online with one of these modem things you keep hearing about. You can do it on your cell phone now. Go to Facebook, go to LinkedIn, just go to Google and find somebody. But use the internet to build our community. Thank you very much.